to thank everybody. Thank you all for inviting me here today. This is great. National Literary Landmark once again. I come here today from the stretch of sand where the words Beston and National Literary Landmark first came together, and that was in October of 1964. I was on Cape Cod. Although I've made my living by way of the written word for the past 24 years, it's usually been as a voice for others. My powers of observation and abilities as a writer, they don't even approach those of Henry, Elizabeth, or some of the others I'll refer to here today. I'll take you back to that special occasion in 1964 when Henry Beston's outermost house was dedicated as one of the early national literary landmarks on East Ham's Coast Guard Beach. Although Cape Cod is some 200 miles as the gull flies from here, I find the descriptions from that event strikingly similar to what we're experiencing here today. In fact, it's probably more than appropriate to substitute words such as Chimney Farm, Nobleboro, Maine, and Damariscotta Lake Watershed Association for outermost house, forecastle, Cape Cod, and National Seashore in these particular instances. The late Nan Turner Waldron, who stayed in Beston's outermost house for parts of 17 years, and she wrote the book Journey to Outermost House, and her work and resources became the foundation of the Henry Beston Society, noted a description of Henry that Elizabeth Coatsworth once wrote in the book Journey to Outermost House. Nan noted this: "Only when he became part of a landscape could he write about it." Waldron went on to write an amazing comment. It's like the master storyteller, he infused his mind with the setting, combined the simplest observations with perceptive insights, and having opened the door, implored the reader to follow. Nothing complicated, nothing intellectually remote. He presented not his, but the broader picture of man's relationship with the earth. Two places where Henry became part of the landscape were the outer beach of Cape Cod and right here in Nobleboro. The longtime literary editor of the Worcester Telegram and Gazette in Massachusetts, Ivan Sandroff, was one of the organizers of the Outermost House National Literary Landmark dedication. In 1974, he flashed back to that day 10 years earlier, where Henry Beston stood before the crowd at the beach that he so loved, reading the closing sentences of his book. "I was intent on his words, which I had read so many times, and ignored the flashes of white," Sandroff recalled, and then it hit him. He wrote, "Dozens of people were openly weeping. Beston's soaring words had reached their hearts and emotions. These were true Cape Codders, they knew the Cape, and they cared." Again, feel free to substitute some of those words with the main references. Earlier in the ceremony, which the Bestons referred to as the coronation, Henry was honored by representatives of the Department of the Interior and the Massachusetts Audubon Society, who Beston donated his house to a few years earlier. The governor of Massachusetts, Endicott Peabody, served as master of ceremonies, and he paid a heartfelt tribute to the author. He said, "You've described our great beach here and the ocean that comes in upon it as no one else ever could or ever will. The Outermost House, as a testament, has had immeasurable influence. Your book is one of the reasons that the Cape Cod National Seashore exists today, to protect the beach and many acres around it for our future generations." And even George Palmer, who was representing the Department of the Interior in place of Interior Secretary Stuart Udall, he acknowledged Beston's impact. A few years before the park was established, when the Park Service was trying to determine whether the area should become a national park, the earliest reports from the Park Service representative offered up a quotation from the Outermost House. "Outermost cliff and solitary dune, the plain of ocean and the far bright rims of the world, meadowland and marsh and ancient moor, this is the Outer Cape." And it took us several pages of a report just to say this, Palmer said. And he received the same response just as here just now. As we went on, we found that much of our work was picked up in Mr. Beston's book. A month after that ceremony, Elizabeth Coatsworth wrote a letter to Nan Turner Waldron. And she said, "It's a pleasure to know that the forecastle still lives in people's hearts, which is even better than being a national literary monument. The occasion was so filled with enveloping kindness that it left Henry very happy." Becoming part of the landscape was essential to both Beston and Waldron. In Waldron's book, Northwood's Walkabout, A Maine Odyssey, she wrote, "I like to get to know a place, to soak up its atmosphere until I wear it like a pair of old sneakers and a floppy hat. When I feel that I belong to a wild place, it is the place which teaches me about myself, which urges me to open doors, to hear new voices, to review the lessons from earth begun in my childhood." Richard Nelson in The Island Within wrote, "There may be more to learn by climbing the same mountain 100 times than climbing 100 different mountains." Even though they traveled all over the world, Henry Beston belonged to the Outer Beach, and Henry and Elizabeth belonged to this place. They became part of the landscape. On behalf of the Beston Society, I would like to congratulate everyone who made this day possible. And to borrow one more quote from the 1964 event, Henry said, "I thank all the eminent men and women who have honored me with their presence today. We are all in joy in knowing that the great beach where we stand has been set aside by our own government." And he continued, "You have honored human awareness that perceives the nature about us and attempts to find words to give another kind of harmony, human, as well as that of the elements." Thanks for having me, folks.